Good evening. My name is Steve Kahn. I would like to call this regular meeting of the Planning Commission order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Before we call roll, I would like to welcome two new members to the Planning Commission, Lindsay Ringer and Eric Toll. Would Deputy City Clerk Megan Wilbanks please administer the oath of office?
Thank you, Chair. I have their oaths here. If you both would just meet me down in the front.
Good luck.
There we go. Okay. And we'll start with Lindsay first saying her name, and then you can both repeat after me. So
I, Lindsay Ringer,
I, Eric Tolley,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
I furthermore agree to abide
Furthermore, agree to abide
by the rules, regulations, and laws
by the rules, regulations, and laws
of the City of San Luis Obispo.
of the City of San Luis Obispo.
You're officially sworn in. I will just collect a signature on both of those.
Welcome aboard. We appreciate your duty and your service, and welcome aboard. Now, Deputy City Clerk, would you now call the roll, please?
Commissioner Cooley,
Here.
Commissioner Houghton, Commissioner Jorgensen,
Here.
Commissioner Munoz Morris,
Here.
Commissioner Ringer, Commissioner Tolley,
Here.
and Chair Khan.
Here. All right. As required by the Planning Commission bylaws, the Planning Commissioner will hold annual elections for chair and vice chair to a one-year term. Do I have a nomination for the position of chair?
I do have a nomination in mind, but I'd like to say that this is a little different than often becomes before the Planning Commission, because usually it's done strictly by seniority, but we've been shorthanded for a bit, and several things have happened. For one thing, the current chair actually replaced Nick Quinn when he left to go to LA, of all places, Claremont, and so that was in the middle of the year, so he didn't actually serve a full term. Then we also have candidates who were actually appointed at the same time in Justin and Dave. So we might be splitting the baby or something, I don't know, or get a left arm from one of them or right arm from another or something like that. So it's a little more difficult than usual. Given all that, though, I'd still like to say I would like to nominate Juan Munoz Morris for chair, because I think in some ways he has the most seniority of those who have not served.
Do I have a second on that motion?
I'll second that. But Bob, I thought you were next senior member.
Gee, I've already served.
Oh, okay, okay.
It
Then
was
I'll-
such an eventful year, nobody remembers.
Then I will second the nomination with enthusiasm.
Thank you very much. Deputy Clerk, will you please call the roll on the motion?
And just before I get to the roll, I want to make sure that Commissioner Munoz Morris accepts the nomination.
Yes, I would be happy to. I do have one question for you. Do I vote on this? It feels weird to vote for myself.
You can vote for it because you're accepting the nomination and showing
Okay.
your support for it.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. With that, Commissioner Jorgensen,
Aye.
Commissioner Houghton,
Aye.
Commissioner Cooley,
Aye.
Commissioner Ringer,
Aye.
thank you, Commissioner Tully,
Aye.
and Commissioner Munoz Morris.
Aye.
And that motion passes.
Thank you very much. Congratulations. Do I have a nomination for the position of vice chair?
I'd be glad to step in and make another nomination. Maybe it's easier because I know I don't want to be the chair to do that again. So next in seniority would really be Justin Cooley and Dave Houghton. They both were appointed the same day. And they've both been excellent commissioners, so it'd be logical for either one of them. And I'm kind of, I don't have an easy way to kind of split the baby, so to speak, or to, make a big decision here. But I think I would just say at this point, I would go alphabetically by last name, and Justin Cooley then would become the vice chair. And that would sort of put Dave Houghton in line to be the vice chair next year. And I think it still could work out that way.
Could I ask of the two of you, do you have a particular interest or preference? Do either of you want it and the other one doesn't? I mean, before we put it.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I find it hard to believe I'm even in the running. I only got here in October, so
It's for the optics, mainly.
yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It feels like I just recently got here, but I would accept it, sure.
Sure. I guess in that case, I would go alphabetically as well because I'm not quite sure how to choose.
So if that's a nomination, I'll second that.
Okay,
Okay, Commissioner Cooley.
that was my nomination.
We have a motion and a second. Will Deputy Clerk please call the roll on the motion?
Commissioner Jorgensen,
Aye.
Commissioner Houghton,
Aye.
Commissioner Cooley,
Aye.
Commissioner Munoz Morris,
Aye.
Commissioner Ringer,
Aye.
Commissioner Tully,
Aye.
and Chair Cohen.
Aye.
And that motion passes.
Thank you very much.
And I would just suggest that we take like a quick 5-minute break just to reseat and adjust the mic ID cards because we do need to move those.
Oh,
around
wow.
a
I actually
little
get
bit.
I
Yeah.
get the big chair.
Do we
Oh,
have
man.
punch and cookies?
All right, then we'll go ahead and resume the meeting at this time. I feel like it should say something silly like, for the record, my first word should be bwahaha as chairperson, but no, actually, I'll start with a serious note. I'll thank former chairperson Han for his leadership, and hopefully I can take a page from you and learn how to run an effective meeting. So, yeah, and welcome to the new commissioners. I guess as far as I'm concerned, I welcome the conversation and the debate. So if you have something to say, please feel free to speak up or unmute yourself and we'll have a conversation. As needed, we can guide it with a motion or with other actions. So but please speak up. All right, at this time, we will hear any public comment for items not on tonight's agenda. Items raised are generally referred to staff, and if action by the commission is necessary, may be scheduled for a future meeting. Deputy Clerk, do we have any public comments?
Thank you, Chair. I haven't received any requests to speak from members in the audience. However, if there's somebody that did want to speak, you can indicate now. Okay, Chair, seeing none.
Great. We'll move on to the consent calendar. Consent calendar items consist of matters deemed routine and non-controversial by staff. Unless a member of the Planning Commission wishes to pull an item for individual consideration, all items will be approved by one motion. Public comment, if a member of the public would like to provide public comment on the consent items, please complete a speaker card and give it to the clerk now. Do we have any speaker cards for the consent items?
I do not.
Great. Commissioners, do we have any items that any of you wish to pull from the consent? Great. In that case, do we have a motion and a second?
I'll move approval of the consent agenda.
And I would second.
Great. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We will move on to item 6 for the public hearings. Any court challenge to the action taken on public hearing items on this agenda may be limited to considering only those issues raised at the public hearing or in written correspondence delivered to the City of San Luis Obispo at or prior to the public hearing. If you wish to speak, please give your name and address for the record. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. We'll start with, I believe, item 6A, the review of comprehensive update to the subdivision regulations of Title 16 of the Municipal Code. I have Senior Planner Brian Lavelle presenting tonight. Floor is yours, Brian.
Yes, thank you, Chair Munoz Morris. Members of the Planning Commission, good evening. I'm Brian Lavelle, Senior Planner in Community Development. Pleased to bring this item before you this evening. And staff's requesting that the Planning Commission forward a recommendation to the City Council to introduce and adopt an ordinance effectively implementing the recommended subdivision regulations that are shown in your draft resolution, Exhibit A. Just briefly, the overall goals of the project, they're mainly to implement housing element policy, achieve consistency with the zoning regulations, review procedures. It's also been quite a while since the subdivision regulations have been updated, so there's a number of cleanups required, some corrections, updates needed for consistency with state law. Overall, staff's looking to improve the function, usability of the document for both staff and members of the public. And this is an update effort is consistent with ongoing efforts to update various planning regulations, such as the zoning regulations, which typically comes on sort of an annual or biannual basis for needed updates. Starting with the housing element implementation, this is really sort of the key driver of this update. It's a strategic task of the 22-23 housing and homelessness major city goal. And the updates to implement housing element policy 6.20 are sort of centered around the supporting small lot subdivisions. Specifically, the policy calls for updating the subdivision regulations to support small lot subdivisions, bungalow court development, and other alternatives to conventional subdivisions. What staff's recommending to implement this policy is in Chapter 16.17, the flexible lot design subdivision is what's recommended for the multifamily zones, and then the commercial zones that also allow mixed-use development. Essentially, the flexible lot design is similar to how we would review a condominium project or an airspace subdivision, where we look to sort of the exterior boundaries of the project, and then for sort of the development regulations, in other words, the amount of the density that's allowed on the parcel, meeting the required parking, the overall lot development standards. And then the flexible lot design allows various lot designs, flexible lot designs that can be any size or shape. Interior to the subdivision, there can be different setbacks. Parking can be located on different parcels based on easements. There can be various configurations with common areas or easements across other lots. And then what staff's recommending in the R1 zone's a little bit more limited. It's also called the flexible lot design subdivision. That would allow up to an R1 flexible lot design project up to 4 lots. In this case, the lots could be various shapes or dimensions. There would be a minimum 6,000 square feet just to support the density for a single family residence on each lot. And then staff's also recommending a moderate architectural review. So that would require review, a recommendation by the Architectural Review Commission, and then action by the director. And then in this chapter, staff's recommending some updates to the airspace subdivisions components, and there's also some updates to the condominium projects, mostly just clarification, making it a little bit more clear what the standards are that apply to those projects. And then the condominium conversions component of this just really consists of some updates to have the section read a little bit better, fixing sort of some timeline issues as far as when applications needed to be submitted and acted on, just sort of clarifying those regulations. We haven't seen a condominium conversion in quite a while. We had a number of these back in the 2006 to 2008 or 9 timeframe. But nevertheless, the updates are good to have just in case we start to see those come back again. As far as review procedures consistency, staff's recommending some updates to bring the subdivision review component of projects into alignment with the zoning regulations. Currently, we have a situation where the zoning regulations were updated in 2021 to streamline review based on sort of a minor, moderate, and then a major level of review. And the subdivision regulations not being updated concurrently with that, we're currently in a situation where there's sort of an extra step required. We have projects that are coming to the Planning Commission or the director that could normally be approved at that level, and they're having to go through an extra step of review to the Planning Commission and then to the City Council for projects that require tentative tract maps. So these changes would allow the Planning Commission to act on tentative tract map applications. And previously, that was something that had to go to the City Council for both tentative tract map and final map review. So this would change that process. In the planning component, applicants, developers would be able to have their projects approved at the planning level by the Planning Commission for a tentative tract map, and then the final map would still need to go to the City Council. The other thing that's been added that can really streamline and make possible this concurrent review is that staff's added some provisions to allow condominium projects to be processed as tentative parcel maps. And this is pretty significant because currently, in the current regulations, a condominium project that's zoned residential, that's more than five units or more, has to go through a recommendation with the Planning Commission, and then a tentative tract map review with the council, and then go back again for a final map with the council. So that is an opportunity to streamline multifamily projects and make those projects concurrent in review with the zoning regulations. And then staff's updated some sections in this chapter just to make a little bit more clear how to determine whether or not a tentative parcel map is going to be required or whether a tentative tract map is going to be required. And all the changes are really intended to sort of reduce the extra review steps and achieve those goals that we set out for initially to achieve that concurrent review. Staff's recommending a new chapter, 16.15, for urban lot splits. This addresses the state mandates that the city review and objectively review and have a ministerial review process for proposed urban lot splits. These are in the R1 zone. The state has a very detailed government code criteria for how the city needs to review these projects. And setting these standards in the subdivision regulations just makes it more clear on exactly how the city is going to process these subdivisions, the qualifying requirements, what types of lots, where they can be located. Most of this is just sort of implementing and consistent with government code. And then objective standards are there for access, setbacks, And then there's a criteria for exceptions, which sort of fills a gap that was in the state law as far as how an SB 9 urban lot split applicant can ask for exceptions. And staff thinks that's pretty important because it sets a clear criteria where prior to asking for exceptions, an applicant would need to first demonstrate that it's not possible to redesign their project. And then secondly, it sets a criteria where essentially it's the minimum amount of exception needed. So if an applicant wants to request an SB 9 subdivision, needs an exception, they need to go through that process and sort of demonstrate why it's necessary. Sure, yeah. SB 9 is a provision that the legislature approved that essentially requires local jurisdictions to approve subdivisions that meet certain criteria in the government code. So it needs to be ministerial, it can't be discretionary, it has to be approved on an objective basis. So this is kind of a way to sort of establish a process for that. The way the SB 9 provisions are written, the director has the final determination based on whether to approve or deny ministerially based on conformance with the recommended code sections. More to add?
Sure. One small tweak to your description is that SB 9
Can I ask another question and follow up on that? So you can, under SB 9, is this part of the package of regulations that came down from Sacramento to encourage more housing, ADUs and all that stuff, right? So you can put a second single family by right on R1, and then you can subdivide, and now you have 2 lots. Can those, each of those subdivided lots now have 2 single families? Can you can't double up that way, but you can add ADUs per the ADU regs. Is that about the way that works?
There's a maximum of 2 dwelling units on each of the properties. So a subdivided property could have both a primary and an ADU.
So an ADU doesn't count as a dwelling unit, it's a ADU.
Correct.
Okay. All right, thanks for all that.
And as far as consistency with the general plan, staff's recommending some updates to the subdivision design standards, part of the subdivision regulations. There's some updated provisions for lot line configurations, basically where lot lines should be placed, some additional language, and that is partially in response to the SB 9 component, just knowing that there will be proposals for new lot lines and subdivisions in existing neighborhoods. So some of the modifications there would include just stating basically that lot lines should generally be located either perpendicular or parallel to existing lot lines, just to try to get lots that are generally consistent with neighborhood pattern. Of course, under SB 9, an exception could still be asked for to that provision. There's some sections that are recommended to be added for hillside standards and policies of the zoning code and the general plan. Essentially, that will help with review of subdivision projects, just to be able to have those regulations within the subdivision regulations that sort of pertain to subdivision proposals versus going back and referencing separate documents and standards. It's also helpful to add within the hillside standards and the subdivision regulations exactly when the hillside standards apply. That wasn't exactly so easy to determine before. Basically, it's based on slope, 16% or more, or it's a parcel that's proposed in one of the hillside planning areas that's designated in the general plan. And then the alternative design standards for roads and street design is recommended for removal. That was at the recommendation of the Public Works Transportation Division. Basically, they aren't practical. They don't have an actual application at this point in time. Since those components were added to the subregs, the land use and circulation element's been updated. There's multimodal policies. There's been updates to engineering standards. And so that was just something that the transportation manager recommended, the removing those sections. And then there were some updates, some cross-references to the active transportation plan and some other updated standards. As far as general plan consistency, the subdivision regulations update is consistent with the general plan. It's directly implementing housing element policy. It provides by providing those map types for small lot subdivisions with the flexible lot design. There's the various other updates that sort of help with the usability of the document. There's the concurrent and streamlined review component that also supports housing development and review. And the updates are really intended to better support general plan implementation since they better coordinate now with the other planning regulations that are most commonly used, the zoning most specifically, specific plans and design guidelines. For environmental review, the update is exempt from environmental review pursuant to the general rule of the CEQA guidelines. It exempts activities that can be seen with certainty to not have a potential for causing a significant impact on the environment. Of course, the subdivision regulations simply implement other planning documents and policies that and are consistent with other planning documents and policies that determine the physical development in the city. And subdivision proposals in the future that are put forth to the city pursuant to the update will be reviewed in accordance with CEQA. As far as next steps, the project's scheduled to go to the City Council on June 5th. There'd be, May 16th. There'd be a second reading on June 5th. After that, 30 days goes by and the ordinance would become effective on July 5th. And again, there's a staff recommendation and staff's available for any questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Brian, for the presentation. Commissioners, any questions for staff? Yes, Commissioner Howard.
A couple of more follow-ups. At 1615, that new section, is that pretty much copied and pasted from other recommendations that came down from the state, or did we make that up from whole cloth?
It's predominantly just reformatting and making the process a little more clear, but reflecting government code. Some of the sections are, and then there are some added sections that sort of pertain to the city's process, just to make clear how we process these maps. And then, as I mentioned, the section on how to request exceptions kind of fills a gap on how that issue would be dealt with in the government code. So it's predominantly is a reflection of government code.
Okay, great. And then, Michael, you commented that, or you both commented, I think we haven't seen much of this actually happen, these subdivisions. Do we think that's primarily because we just have small lots and there's not room for people to subdivide? Or is it, that's what I would think it is, or is there actually not that much interest in it?
Combination of both. Turns out a lot of property owners aren't really interested in necessarily cutting off a small parcel on their existing property. And there still are some difficulties and some challenges with developed properties to get access to the public right of way. So it's physical improvements that are already existing that's also a significant barrier.
And those would have to be sort of flagpole type subdivisions, right?
One more item, there's an owner occupancy requirement as well. So,
No. Okay, great. And then one last small question. You mentioned a slope exception, 16% or greater, and then different criteria apply. Is that how that works?
Right, yeah, the 16% is just, if any part of the project, at least this is what's recommended, is to implement that policy. If any part of the subdivision, essentially the property boundaries exceeds 16%, the project's subject to hillside design standards.
Okay, and that probably doesn't happen a whole lot in this town. I'm thinking like Terrace Hill, maybe places like that. And I'm seeing a couple houses going in there on steep lots, but that just is an engineering thing, really, right?
Yeah, it's pretty rare to see subdivisions on those kinds of hillsides. And the benefit of sort of making, it's always been a regulation, really. It just makes it clear in the subdivision regulations that it's easy to draw lines on paper, actually showing how you can grade the property, how you can place a home that's consistent with community design guidelines and that doesn't require large retaining walls and other site features that are inconsistent with other regulations is another matter. So that's why architectural review is required and a full submittal, so that if a subdivision is proposed on hillsides, we have the ability to complete that review and see exactly what the impact of the hillside would be.
Okay, that's great. No further questions here.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Ringer?
Yeah, how is it determined that there's no CEQA impacts? I'm wondering about carbon emissions from increased density, so like air quality impacts.
Yeah, it just depends on the specifics of what's proposed. If the project, typically we would look at on a subdivision, a minor subdivision or 4 lots or fewer, there's an exemption in CEQA for those projects. In other words, that sort of goes along with the parcel map and the tentative tract map issue. Tentative tract maps, larger projects are going to be subject to CEQA. That's sort of looking at the map component itself. If there's another component of the project that involves development and the subdivisions proposed concurrently along with development of a parcel, then staff would go through the process of really looking at CEQA. Is there an exemption that applies? If there isn't an exemption that can be applied, then an initial study needs to be conducted under CEQA guidelines. I don't know if that answers your question directly.
So at what scale is this planning proposal being implemented across the whole city?
Brian, I think the question is about the environmental review for this update, not for projects.
Right.
Not for projects submitted pursuant to the, okay, I've got that. So, right, the general rule, essentially what it states is that the update itself, the changes that are recommended do not result in physical effects on the environment. So the subdivision regulations are implementing existing policies of the city, zoning regulations. They don't allow for any type of development or physical effects that aren't already allowed. So the update itself, it can be seen according to the exemption that the update itself does not have a potential impact on the environment for those reasons.
So the logic being here that subdivision regulations implements general plan policies in our overall general plan program. Our general plan had a EIR, and all of the associated mitigation measures have been implemented through that update and through subsequent updates of the zoning regulations. This is part of a work program that just continues to implement the land use element. It doesn't create any additional build-out population. It doesn't rezone land. It doesn't have any, there's no action onto itself, as Brian said, that has an impact on the environment.
Any additional questions? Yeah.
One small one, this is kind of picky. I mean, I've read through the summary and it seems like this is really cleanup and streamlining and coordinating and just kind of updating, nothing major here, but the word tentative still, it's probably goes throughout a lot of the language in all this, but just seems tentative. I mean, why don't we use the word draft, or is that, I don't think we're going to change it, but it just seems strange to me.
The term tentative, for like tentative map, how a tentative map's referred to, it's just the Subdivision Map Act parlance. It's kind of the term that's used consistently throughout that's the term jurisdictions use. That's the term the Subdivision Map Act uses. Surveyors, civil engineers, use the word draft. That's kind of what it is in a way. It's the initial map submittal, and then the follow-up action is the parcel map recordation and the final map if it's a tentative tract map. But we did actually, I didn't go into that. That's some other changes staff made to try to make this a little bit more clear and less confusing. The previous language was minor subdivision and tentative tract map, and it got even more confusing. So this is actually an effort to try to make it a little bit more clear.
Okay, good enough for me, thanks.
Right. Additional questions, thoughts? Seeing none, we'll turn over to public comment. So Deputy Clerk, do we have any speaker cards for this item?
For this item, I have not received any speaker cards.
Okay, seeing nobody rushing forward in the audience, we'll go ahead and close public comment and bring back to the dais for additional discussion or for someone to bring forward a motion.
Seeing no additional discussion, I'd make a motion to approve staff's recommendation.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Right. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Actually, City Clerk, let me ask you, is it better to do a roll call vote for these items?
Yeah, for public hearing and business items, we do prefer to do a roll call.
Okay,
vote.
in
For
that case,
consent
let's
items, it's
take that back and do a roll call vote, yeah.
Okay, so I have Vice Chair Cooley,
Aye.
Commissioner Houghton,
Aye.
Commissioner Jorgensen,
Aye.
Commissioner Khan,
Aye.
Commissioner Ringer,
No.
no, okay, Commissioner Tully,
Aye.
and Chair Munoz Morris,
Aye.
and that motion passes.
Great. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 6B, which is the review of the cannabis business overlay zone expansion to include the recently annexed Fierro Lane, Clarion Court, and East Airport areas. I believe we have Cannabis Business Coordinator Alex Fuchs. Am I saying that correctly? Close enough? Partial credit? Okay, great. Welcome, Alex. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, members of the Planning Commission. As has already been stated, the item before you tonight is a recommendation to adopt a resolution recommending that the City Council introduce and approve a amendment to the city's zoning map to expand the cannabis business overlay zones to include the recently annexed areas of Fierro Lane, Clarion Court, and East Airport area that are both within the airport area specific plan. In 2018, City Council adopted cannabis business overlay zones to designate and clarify for applicants and the community where cannabis business activities may be permitted. Currently, there are 7 separate zones shown in green on this city map. The areas were determined based on a variety of criteria, including appropriate land use types for all the permits that the city offers for cannabis activities, areas that were free or generally free of sensitive uses like schools, daycare facilities, public parks, things of that nature. And then for retail storefronts, the zones, not all of them, but some of them contained properties that fronted arterial streets like Higuera Street, Broad Street, Prado Road, things of that nature. The intent was to establish areas, and then as staff and the community got used to and some experience with cannabis businesses operating within the city, look for opportunities to expand these areas and to really sort of normalize cannabis business activities just as we would any other sort of any other sort of commercial activity within the city. And so 40 tonight is sort of an opportunity to expand those areas from 7 to 9 to include the 2 recently annexed properties. So Fierro Lane is shown here on the top of the map, just north of the airport, west of Broad Street, and then the East Airport area is east of Broad Street, directly across from the airport. And as said earlier, both of them are within the airport area specific plan, and at least for the East Airport area was long identified as a potential annexation area of the city, I think going back to about 2005. So the Fierro Lane Clarion Court area was annexed in November 2019. It's comprised of 3 main land use types that allow for development. That'd be service commercial, business park, and manufacturing. The entire area totals almost 39 acres, constitutes about 500,000 square foot of total building area as it is right now. And as I said before, is located within the airport area specific plan. The East Airport area was annexed about 6 months later in March of 2020. It contains 2 sort of development areas, the East Airport area Commerce Park and then the Senglic development. It totals almost 60 acres. 23 of those parcels are developed with 10 that are still left to be developed. It's zoned service commercial throughout, and it does have service commercial properties that front an arterial street, which would allow for the permitting of retail storefront cannabis businesses. So the City Council, and I believe again 2018, established appropriate land use types and corresponding cannabis permits that can be allowed in certain zones depending on the level of approval. So the 3 land use types that you see within the Fierro Lane and Clarion Court area and in the East Airport area are what is circled in orange. So service commercial, manufacturing, and business park. So effectively these areas, if approved by Planning Commission tonight and then ultimately approved by City Council in May, would at least in theory allow for all commercial cannabis activities to take place. Now there are other zoning requirements that would have to be met, limitations on the number of applications and permits that the city would issue, but generally these are the land use and permit types and approval levels that would be required. Pretty quick presentation, but again, the recommendation is to adopt a draft resolution recommending City Council introduce and approve an amendment to the zoning map expanding the cannabis business overlay zones. Happy to take questions from commission members as well as members of the public if there are public comment.
Great. Thank you, Alex. Commissioners, questions for Alex? I see a couple hands. Commissioner Han?
Yeah, I saw today that there was a question we got from a resident, I believe, or not a resident, but a business owner in the Fierro Lane area. And she was concerned about smells. And I remember a recent trip, I went to Greenfield and I was at the city hall there and I got out of my car and it was like, whoa, there's a big old building. And I just wondered, as a broader question, well, what does the industry do about, manufacturing and stuff like that about the smell? Is there any type of mitigation they have or?
No, absolutely. So first of all, let me back up to the Fierro Lane Clarion Court map. So without knowing more about the specific correspondence, I did read through it, but without digging into it, I'm assuming it's in reference to this company called Papa Bear Farms, which was a cannabis delivery service that was located in this area back in 2018 or 2019 before it was annexed by the city. But the city itself requires indoor cultivation only. We require extensive HVAC systems be installed to mitigate the smell, and we require that no smell, site of product, or whether it's completed cannabis or cannabis being grown for cultivation be visible from the street or noticeable by anybody outside the facility.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. I just didn't know if there were methods to actually stop the smell. So I appreciate that because it is pretty, pungent. Anyway, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great, thanks. I believe I saw Commissioner Jorgensen.
Yeah, you don't know because.
It's a toss-up, yeah.
We can speak at the same time.
I just acknowledge both of you and one of you can take the lead.
Yeah. I just need my memory refreshed if you could. I just didn't recall approval of the cannabis area in the northwest corner of Tank Farm and Broad. And it's talking about 300 feet from any residential areas. I'm just not remembering us going at that. Could you help me? Could you refresh my memory on how we got that in this and how is that going to look with all the units that are there?
Are you referring to an existing
I'm
overlay
looking
zone
at the
area?
map here. Yeah, the existing overlay zone. I just didn't remember approving it.
Yeah. So,
at the northwest corner of Tank Farm and Broad.
so there is a requirement for a 300-foot buffer from residential uses, but that's for retail storefronts. So that
right.
area may not be viable for retail storefronts, but it would be available for other permit types to be
Well,
located
there certainly
there.
are retail storefronts, but they're all pretty close to residential units.
I think the standard here is the buffer is not from residential units, it's from residential zoning, residential land, and these are mixed-use projects that have commercial zoning.
Good point.
So what does that mean in this case in practice?
In practice, it means that we're talking about the corner of Tank Farm and Broad.
And I'm thinking of the 4 big parcels
Yeah.
of housing development proposed.
Yeah,
Like,
that those are in a cannabis business zone and they're on an arterial road so that they would be eligible for a retail store.
So there is no restriction about distance from,
Not from residences, but from residential zones.
okay.
Well, and the any retail storefront would come to the planning commission for consideration. So there'd be an opportunity at that time to have a discussion about it if for project-specific limitations.
Okay.
And, if the planning commission could also ask staff to, reconsider that cannabis business zone. And I think the way we would do that would be talk to those property owners and see, like, if there was just general agreement given the development that's been entitled and that's moving forward at this point, if they wanted to remove those properties from a cannabis business zone, that the city may be able to accommodate that as well. At least we'd consider it. But that's
But it was part of the initial.
the original.
Yeah. Thank you.
Quick question. Can you estimate, just kind of based on your knowledge, how much this would affect the income stream for this business, type of business?
You mean for leasing of properties?
Revenue, revenue for cannabis producing businesses that are based within the city of SLO?
No, I mean, I wouldn't be able to speak to that, I'm not in the industry itself. I'm just more on the regulation side, but I can say anecdotally from a presentation that Michael and I did to the Chamber of Commerce, there was some representatives from Megan's Organic Market. They were saying that at least for rental prices, leasing that they're seeing is they're paying typically above market rate for that, and retail storefronts are more difficult to turn a profit on than other types of cannabis activities. Say like, as an example, cannabis delivery just has lower overhead and slightly lower requirements at the state and local level.
It's pretty challenging to find space for this industry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Cooley, I believe you were waiting.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. As noted in the report, we did see an item about a overlay zone back in February, and it looks like the process is pretty similar here. And I just wanted to ask, is there anything about this area that is different as far as what was considered, or any, for example, is the proximity to the airport, does that pose any challenges that are different than what we saw in February, or are there any special considerations?
The big difference is that the item in February only included the Eastport area. It did not include the Fierro Lane, Clarion Court. And instead of going back to council twice with two separate recommendations and ordinances to introduce, staff decided to come back to Planning Commission one more time for Fierro Lane and then hopefully go to council a single time.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Houghton?
How confident are we in the capture of this HVAC system that's required for cannabis activities, that actually works and does its job?
I mean, confident enough to where if an operator can't meet that requirement, then they will be subject to violations, suspension, and then if they can't correct it, ultimately revocation of their permit. So
Okay.
Yeah, all operators know that they need to meet this with no wiggle room.
So remedies are available if it is a problem.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. And then the area near the airport, doesn't that include, I ride my bike through there sometimes, and there's a church of some kind out there that's kind of right off and has everybody in that area been noticed either with mail or other means of what's this overlay zone is happening?
So postcard notifications did go out to the occupants and owners of properties within these areas and then within 300 feet of the boundaries. And then they also got it at least for East Airport area in February when that item came before the Planning Commission. And then they'll be noticed again in May if this item is approved to go to council for consideration.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Great. More questions? I did have a quick one before we go to public comment. Can you bring up the chart where you were showing the approval, the level of approval, I guess I should call it? And I guess we can chuck this to me being drunk with power on my first day as chairman, but I noticed that there's only PC approval for retail storefront operations, and most of the ones that the top four are going through director approval. Can you just kind of maybe comment, is this kind of in line with other policies and we're just kind of mimicking that, or was there a reasoning behind this?
Is it possible I defer to Michael on this just so I don't state anything incorrectly?
Sure.
You know, the initial regulations were the result of a really collaborative, sort of exhaustive public process where we had lots of engagement. And so it's hard to say, you know, specifically, but I think just in terms of what the public interest is and what the potential impact is in terms of number of customers, trips, just the concerns that people have about retail storefronts are different than the other uses. We found that through the process. And so the higher level of review in front of the Planning Commission was determined to be appropriate for retail sales.
Okay, gotcha. It might be just, I was kind of thinking about it a little bit opposite. I understand that retail operations draw a lot of concern with safety and other issues like that with residents and neighbors, but I mean, the letter we received was around a cultivation operation, and nursery manufacturing to me has more potential to create, I guess, concern. So that was really the reason for my question. I'm not necessarily recommending we changing. I'm just, I guess, curious as to why, and kind of recognizing to your point that it could become an issue where the public wants to see a little bit more of a public review of these items down the road. So again, we can table that for when we cross that bridge, when we get to that, I guess. Yeah. Okay, if there are no other questions, then I think we're all good up here. We'll go to public comment. Do we have any comment cards?
Yes, Chair. I have a request to speak from Deborah Denker.
Great.
Deborah, if you please come up to the podium and you'll have 3 minutes to address the commission.
Hello, everybody. I'm Deborah Denker, and my studio and workplace and business is over. I wrote a letter, so you may have already read about it. I'm a photographer. But 3 doors down from me was a space that they were growing marijuana in. And it was a little intense for the neighbors because through the door, anyone next door would smell immediately through, and they ventilated, but I don't know if they had an HVAC system. So that's kind of a concern for me. I do oppose the draft for Fiero. At least we're a condo and we have CC&Rs and other things as well. So we are, each individual space has its own owners at Fiero Commerce Park. So it's a little different than probably Clarion Court and other areas. I don't know how that's going to affect, but I just am concerned with many different things. When they were growing there was people at night coming with their SUVs, and it seemed really sketchy at night when I'd go and work there. And so I just thought I'd put that out there too, that there's a comfort level since it's a cash business and there is a lot of cash going on. I don't know how laws have changed yet with that. So safety, of course, is number one. Do the neighbors feel safe? So that's my opinion. And it's really interesting that nobody comes to your meetings, and it's nice to meet you all. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for coming. Yeah. A small turnout today. No more speaker cards?
No.
I don't see. Okay, and seeing as we'll have anybody else coming up, we'll bring it back to the dais to see if there's any further discussion or if anybody would like to make a motion.
So, if I
Please, I'll go.
I have a discussion item, if I could. Just the kinds of problems that Ms. Denker experienced, would that have been subject to the remedies that we were just talking about, that it's actually the smell is affecting neighbors, and then there would be some kind of response and some kind of something?
So depending on the nature of the complaint, it would either be handled by code enforcement and then myself to the community development department, and then we would do a notice to correct or notice of violations, or if it's more criminal in nature, then it would obviously go to the police department. They have this special enforcement team called SET that handles marijuana cases and other drug related cases within the city. And so an investigator would be tasked with following up with it. And then again, if anything was found to be validated, then it would come back to us and we would go to either suspend or possibly revoke the permit.
Okay, great. And then to tackle this sketchy nature thing, what remedies would be available for that? If there's a lot of cars going back and forth or loud music, or, I guess it would be subject to the usual disturbing the peace kinds of things. Is that fair enough?
Without being in that line of work, I would assume so. There are hours of operations that are set by the state, which is nothing after 10 p.m., nothing before 6 a.m. for all permit types. So that would be in violation of not only their state license, but a local license if they were found to be conducting business during nighttime hours. But yeah, it would be up to police to investigate and enforce, and then charge appropriately.
Okay, and then addressing this cash problem, which it still seems persistent. It's kind of ridiculous that we've got this dislocation between state and federal law still, but have there been any, that we know of, issues with the handling of large amounts of cash, robberies? I don't know. Has that been a problem at all?
Not in our community, it hasn't, no. And it until the feds align with the state, that's always going to be a conflict with the larger banks engaging in cannabis activities.
Okay, thanks.
They're also not cash only anymore. I believe they accept forms of credit or debit.
They use, debit system.
Or at least some of them, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not just big stacks of cash like it used to be several years ago, maybe?
No. Okay. And the only businesses that would be doing any sort of transactions on site would be retail storefronts.
Okay.
Which are very limited.
And then do we have cultivation and or nurseries happening in the city limits?
No, currently we only have retail storefronts and
Okay.
delivery services.
Yeah, I would think that you'd want to be out of town for that. The land's too expensive here, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I commute sometimes down High Garra and I go by Megan's and I haven't smelled anything. I've seen a lot of traffic though. So, all right, no further questions. Thanks.
Commissioner Toll, I believe you were waiting patiently.
To the speaker's point, does staff know if that operation that she was citing was permitted or not permitted?
The Papa Bear Farms was a permitted cannabis business through the county, and then upon annexation, they started going through our permitting process, and for what I believe to be their individual business reasons, decided not to complete the process and ended up moving out of the area.
Okay, so they're no longer present there?
Not at that location or within the city limits.
Okay, thanks.
That raises a question, actually reminds me of a question I wanted to ask, which is, would it be fair to say that the city's policies around cannabis businesses are more restrictive than county policies, and therefore this business would have had to make some significant improvements in order to be compliant with city policies?
I haven't analyzed the county's requirements for applying or permitting specifically, but we recently went through some changes to our retail storefront operational guidelines, and we were the most restrictive amongst about 10 or 11 other agencies that we looked at when it came to hours of operation, who's allowed into the store, and so on and so forth. Okay. So I would say we have a robust and comprehensive permitting system.
Yes.
Yeah, the city applies a lot of resources to administering the program and enforcing the requirements of the program. That results in costs in terms of application fees and annual renewal permits to operators. It's one of the largest complaints that we've received from operators about our program is the cost. And based on our financial or budget policies, we do have a policy of 100% cost recovery. So there are jurisdictions that choose to put less resource or choose to use some of the tax revenue to fund some of these things. But in our city, we do 100% cost recovery for the administrative components of the program, and the tax revenue, which is currently about $1 million a year that we're receiving, goes to benefit the community at large.
Okay, great, thank you for that. I had another question, but it just ran off my mind, so I guess I'll save it for some other time. Back to discussion or motion by anyone? Yes, Commissioner Hahn.
I'll go ahead and attempt a motion here. Anyway, I make a motion to adopt the draft resolution recommending the city council introduce and adopt an ordinance expanding the cannabis business overlay zones to include the Fierro Lane, Clarion Court, and the East Airport area of the airport area specific plan.
Great. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Good. We have a motion and a second, so we'll proceed to roll call vote.
Commissioner Khan,
Yes.
Commissioner Ringer,
Yes.
Commissioner Houghton,
Aye.
Commissioner Jorgensen,
Aye.
Commissioner Tully,
Aye.
Vice Chair Cooley,
Aye.
Chair Munoz Morris.
Aye.
Now motion passes.
Excellent. We'll move right along to item 7 on our agenda tonight, or 7A rather, which is staff updates and agenda forecast. So,
All right. Well, thank
Director
you, Chair,
Tyler.
members of the commission. Just kind of looking out to the next regular scheduled meeting, April 26th. Currently, we have 2 consent items, which were similar to the consent item on general plan conformity determination tonight. So one of them is for our 23-25 financial plan conformity report, as well as a conformity report for property acquisition by the county airport. So those 2 will be on consent. That's all I have for the 26th. And then currently looking out into May, I do not have any items scheduled for May at either of our regularly scheduled meetings at this time. So if something comes up, I'll put something on there and let everybody know that we have a meeting agenda item. So that's my updates for now.
Commissioners, any questions for staff before we move on and adjourn? Seeing none, we'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.